You're listening to Just a Dude podcast with your host, Nathan. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Let's roll. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Just a Dude podcast, where we sit down with people who've lived incredible stories and dig into the lessons we can all take from them. Today's guest is someone who's faced down challenges most of us can't even imagine, whether it's on the basketball court, in high-stakes SWAT negotiations, or during a 13-year battle with cancer. Through it all, he's turned his experiences into fuel to inspire others. His name is Terry Tucker, and trust me, this is one conversation you don't want to miss. Terry, welcome to the show. Please give the audience a little elevator pitch about yourself.
Sure. Well, Nathan, thanks for having me on initially. I'm looking forward to talking with you today. Yeah, a little bit about me. Born and raised on the south side of Chicago, oldest of three boys. You can't tell this from looking at me or from my voice, but I'm 6'8" tall and actually went to college on a basketball scholarship despite having 3 knee surgeries in high school. After college, I was very lucky to play college ball after that. After college, I moved home to find a job. I'm really going to date myself now, but this was long before the internet was available to help people find employment. Fortunately, I found that first job in the marketing department of the corporate headquarters of Wendy's International, the hamburger chain. That was the good news. Bad news was I lived with my parents for the next 3.5 years as I helped my mother care for my father and my grandmother, who were both dying of different forms of cancer. After Wendy's, I actually went to work for the hospital that cared for my father and my grandmother. I thought they did such a great job that I wanted to be part of that. And then at 37, made the major pivot in my life and became a police officer. And part of what I did during my law enforcement career was I was a SWAT hostage negotiator. After that, started a school security consulting business, coached girls' high school basketball when we lived in Texas. But for the last 13 years now, I've been battling a rare form of cancer, a rare form of melanoma. And then finally, my wife and I have been married for 32 years. We have one child, a daughter, who's a graduate of the United States Air Force Academy and is an officer in the new branch of the military, the Space Force.
Well, that's awesome. You know, it's funny you say that because I worked with someone that was an officer in the U.S. Air Force, and they transitioned to the Space Force as well. He was, I think he was a lieutenant colonel or something like that. But, you know, I said, wow, we finally getting to know people that are in the Space Force, right?
Yeah, it's that sort of branch that nobody knows about, right?
Yeah, exactly. And you know, it's funny, we talked a little bit beforehand, but, you know, I was a police officer for 13 years, and you to pivot, I didn't know that you pivoted at 37, which is, nobody ever does that, right?
Well, I took a whole lot more Tylenol in the police academy than my counter.
I believe it.
Yeah.
I believe it, yes. Yeah, if you didn't have knee problems before, all that running in the academy probably gave it to you, right?
Exactly.
But Terry, what's amazing now is that you're the founder of Motivational Check LLC. So can you tell us a little bit about how you got here?
Sure. So interesting story talking about law enforcement. Motivational check was a phrase that our defensive tactics instructor in the Cincinnati Police Academy gave us as a class, that if we were just having one of those days, you know, I mean, we were getting beat up, we were tired, we couldn't go on, you could just yell that phrase out. And it was one, it was a release, and two, it was to let the rest of the class know, hey, I'm hurting. You know, I need some help. I need some support here. And the rest of the class would respond. We were the 84th recruit class in the Cincinnati Police Department. We would yell out 84. And just to let the person know, hey, you're not alone. You know, we're in this together. We'll get through this together. You don't have to do this by yourself. So when I was thinking of an idea, a name for this quote unquote company that I have, and it's really a company that I use for my writing and for my speaking. Motivational Check was just one of those things that, yeah, that's what it's going to be called. I'm going to call it motivationalcheck.com or Motivational Check LLC, and it's .com for the website, because just that phrase in the academy left such an impact on me that it resonates with me, and I wanted to call the company that.
Yeah, that's awesome that you could take something, you know, from your life. And you're right, you know, and the police academy can be tough for a lot of folks. And, you know, it's grueling, long hours. You know, not only are you getting the educational thing where they make you remember things that you're never going to have to remember when you're on the street because you got the code book, right? But, you know, they're doing the physical things too. And to bring that into this life. But, you know, with that, you're kind of doing you're helping people, you know, lead uncommon and extraordinary lives through storytelling and inspiration, right?
I am. And, it's interesting how this all came about. I had started a speaking business based on what I'd learned as a police officer, what I'd learned from being a college athlete, and what I've learned for 13 years of being a cancer warrior. And, you get to that point and you're like, okay, now what do I say? Where do I go? How do I do this? And I'd started the speaking business and then COVID hit and everything shut down. And a friend of mine reached out and said, "Hey, Terry, would you like to be a guest on my podcast?" And I said, "Sure. What's a podcast?" I honestly,
Right, like all of us did, right?
look, yeah, I had no idea what a podcast was. And he explained it to me. And I thought, hey, I'll give it a try. Ethan, my first podcast, I was horrible. I was terrible. I had Post-it notes all around the camera, and he would ask me a question, and I'd kind of lean in and I'd read one of the Post-it notes. I provided no value whatsoever to the audience. But after it was over, I kind of stepped back and I was like, well, first time I drove a car, I wasn't any good at it. The first time I
Right.
cooked a meal, I think I burned the water. You can't burn the water.
Right.
But, first time I studied algebra, I wasn't any good at it. So it was like, but I liked it. So how do you get good at it? You study, you work. And so every podcast I've been on, I listen to. How many times do I say, or huh? Do I have a good story? Do I have a better story? Can I make it more concise and things like that? So it was all about practicing. And I fumbled quite a few times through different things, but it got to a point where I enjoyed it. And somebody once told me, never make a point without telling a story and never tell a story without making a point. And,
I
if I
love that,
told you
yeah.
five things, yeah, you might remember two of them. But if I told you five things and told you a story about each of them, there's a greater chance you would remember them. So it's for me been about finding good stories or good experiences that I've had in my life and using them to explain the points that I'm trying to make. And so that's kind of how, in all honesty, I've probably been a guest on 750, 800 podcasts around the world at this point.
That's awesome.
It is.
Yeah.
And I've met some amazing people, like I said, from all over the world. And I've just had a great experience. I've never had a bad experience on a podcast. Now, I've been on podcasts where the host should never have had a podcast. They're terrible at what
Right. Yeah.
but at the same time, I've never had a bad experience. It's like you, it's a way to engage in meeting really nice and good and smart.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's so many people out there, and like yourself, where we have these. We're normal everyday people. There's nothing really. I don't want to say downplay it, but there's nothing special about us. We've never been a president of the United States. We're not millionaires, right? Nothing like this. But we're normal people that have a story, and we could help maybe others that are searching for some type of information to better their lives. And that was really the whole reason for me getting this going together, is because as well as I do in police work, we worked with a lot of people that just needed some help. Right. They need, whether it be for us, and obviously, a lot of times we get into these calls and we're meeting them on their worst day. But, if we can, help people like that before it even gets that bad, to say, hey, here's some ideas that you can go through, or here's how you can maybe make your life a little bit better or look at it differently. Maybe we can prevent some of those things for families in the future. And, that's the whole idea of the show. But, for you, you've done a lot, and your career kind of sounds like mine, Terry, is, you've been marketing, hospital admin, SWAT hostage negotiator, cop, high school basketball coach, and a 13-year cancer journey. But what ties all those things together for you to help, other folks?
Yeah. And so, if you look at my resume, it does kind of look like a Super Bowl went off in a room. It's just kind of all over the place. But there is a backstory to it. And the backstory is this. So my paternal grandfather was a Chicago police officer from 1924 to 1954. In 19
Wow.
Yeah, during the, a lot of the
During the gangster times. Yeah.
yeah. And in 1933, he was shot in the line of duty with his own gun. It was not a serious injury. He was shot in the ankle. But my dad, who was an infant when his father was shot, always remembered the stories growing up that my grandmother told of that knock on the door of, Mrs. Tucker, grab your son, come with us, your husband's been shot. So when I expressed an interest in going into law enforcement, my dad was absolutely not. You're going to college. You're going to major in business. You're going to get out,
Right.
get married, have 2.4 kids, and live happily ever after. That's the life my father wanted me to live. That's not the life I felt I was supposed to live. And so when I graduated from college, I had probably the first major adult decision of my life. As I mentioned, my dad was dying of cancer. I could have said, "Hey, Dad, I know you're dying. Sorry about that. I'm going to go do my own thing. I'm going to go blaze my own trail in law enforcement, or out of love and respect for you, I will do what you want me to do." So, understanding that backstory, my first two jobs, the hospital administration and Wendy's, were because that's what my dad wanted me to do. And I always say, I waited till my father passed away and then I followed my own dreams. But Nathan, that's one thing, if your audience doesn't remember a lot of what I said today, that's one thing that I'm incredibly proud of. I never let my dream die. As you mentioned, I was 37 years old when I got into law enforcement. That's pretty old. Most people, like you say,
Yeah.
don't get
Most of
into
us are
law
21 when we go in, right?
Exactly. Exactly. So, but it was always there. It was always something that was sort of tugging at me that this is what you need to do. And, I kept trying to put that square peg in that round hole and it just wasn't going. But I waited till Dad died and then I followed that dream. And I am incredibly happy that I did. It was, law enforcement is different now. I've been out of it for 20 years, but when I was doing it, it was a blast. I mean, I worked with great people. We were trying, as you said, to make a difference,
Yes.
meeting people where they are on their worst day. And it wasn't about taking people to jail. It wasn't about shooting people. It wasn't about doing any of that. It was just about making a difference in the community. And for me, it was the greatest job that I had.
That was the same thing for me, Terry. And I've actually, I talked to you about the changes here in Ohio that are going to be coming up. And I've actually thought about going back. I know it's a lot different now, though, than when I stopped doing it, in 2011. So it's like, that worries me a little bit because it's definitely a different climate for law enforcement throughout the world. But you're right. I had the same, similar experience. My father was a police officer and his entire career, he said, don't do it. So I went to college just kind of like you did, but I wasn't really happy in what I was doing. And I think he could see that. And he said, you know what, if you got to try it, just try it, but be safe, And so his happiest moment is when I got laid off from being a cop because the police department I worked for, the village just got rid of it. They said, we're not going to do it. So he's like, secretly he's going, oh, thank goodness. And then I went on to get degrees and, started different things. But it's still something, even after all these years, that I've missed, because I loved being out there working with the people. It's just like you probably have said, if I can help one soul, to be a little bit better or to lift them up, then it's been worth it.
And it is. And a lot of times, as you know, in law enforcement, it's an underappreciated job. Nobody is happy to see a policeman. Now firemen, everybody loves them.
If everybody loves firemen.
But for us, you never know the impact that you have on people, but you try to make a difference. And I'll never forget this and tell you this kind of quick story. I don't want to tell war stories, but there was an individual who kind of hung out with the dope boys in our area, the guys that were slinging dope. But he didn't really have a record. I mean, he drove without a license, which in Ohio was an M1, but he didn't have a criminal record. And so my partner and I kind of devised this scheme around him. And so we pull up on the corner and, when you pull up, everybody kind of walks away in different directions. We grabbed him, we handcuffed him, we put him in the back of the car and we took him up behind the tennis court. Now I worked nights my entire career. So, this is probably 3:00 in the morning and I'm sure he's thinking, I'm going to get the crap beat out of me here.
Right.
We pull him out. We unhandcuff him. We said, look, you're not in trouble. Just listen to us. We wanted to get you away from your friends. You don't have a valid driver's license. That's your biggest problem. My partner and I are willing to pay the $500 that you need to reinstate your license. 1. 2, you don't have a high school diploma. We've got somebody set up that will help you get your GED so that you can go to college. You can do whatever you want. So you've got a high school diploma. And 3, we've got an individual on the other side of town who is willing to give you a job. Now, understanding all that, are you willing to do that? Is this something that you want to do? Because if you keep hanging around with the guys that you're hanging around with,
yeah, you're going down. Yep.
Yeah, you're going to end up having felony records just like they're going to have felony records. Nathan, what do you think?
Yep. Did he do it? I don't know because sometimes they just chase that dream of their friends, and I've had situations like that. I would have done it myself, but yeah, did he do it?
No, he ended up.
And that's what I feared because a lot of times when you get into those situations, you get so deep down that you stop thinking about yourself and you think about your buddies and you chase that quick buck, right?
Yeah. And that's, he grew up in that area. Those guys were his friends. And about 18 months later, he ended up committing an armed robbery with one of his buddies, got caught, and is now a convicted felon. And my partner and I still talk with her, it's like, can you imagine if he would have said yes to us? How different his life may have turned out? And like I said,
Absolutely.
it's you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink.
Exactly.
Gave him an opportunity. He chose not to do it. And I didn't lose any sleep over it. It was like, look,
No, I mean, Terry,
I
you
was
did
there.
everything. I mean, you probably did more than you should have, right? And most people would say that, but you did everything you could in your power to give the kid an opportunity, and it was up to him. Unfortunately, it's like the climate we're in today with, everything going on in this country is, yeah, we've got, freedom of speech, we've got all these things, but remember, every action has a consequence, whether it be good or bad, right? You can be presented with an opportunity, you can take it or you can deny it, but whatever happens after that, it was your decision. So, and unfortunately, that comes down to accountability. And, we can only provide opportunities, but it's still up to those individuals to take them.
Exactly. And like I said, he grew up in that area, that's all he knew. And to do something so radical, as to go get a job on the other side of town to get your GED when all his buddies were slinging dope. I spent 4.5 years in the drug unit. And, you talk to these guys that are selling drugs and you're like, what are your goals? What are your dreams? What are your aspirations? And they're like, I don't have any of that stuff. I'm going to be dead by the time I'm 30 because some other dope dealer is going to shoot me and take over my territory. So I'm living large now. I'm driving the nice car. I got the gold teeth. I got all the money. And I was like, wow. I mean, not only are you worrying about me as a cop, looking over your shoulder thinking I'm coming, you've got to look over the other shoulder thinking a rival gang member, drug dealer is coming for you as well. What a way to live your life,
Yeah,
especially
I
when
was just
you're a
going to
young
say the
person.
same thing, Terry. How can you live, to live that way so narrow? I hate to call it narrow-mindedly, but it really is narrow-minded, mindset because you're thinking, well, you know what, I'm in this, and instead of saying, you know what, I could do better than this. I could have a normal life like everybody else, or whatever, it may be, or I could be, whatever. They just accept it and just take it. And that to me is probably the most disheartening thing about it, because that there's so many more opportunities out there for them if they just took them.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I remember we pulled this guy over one night and we fortunately had a drug dog working with us, and the drug dog sniffed around the car. We found the stash, and in the trunk, the guy had $88,000 in cash. And we said to him, you realize that now we're going to seize that. That's going to be an asset forfeiture. And I said, why are you driving around with this? And this is what he said. He said, everybody knows I'm a drug dealer. They know where I live. So they're just going to wait until I leave, and then they're going to break into
And
my
take the
house
money.
and they're going to steal
Yep.
my money. So I'm going to just take it with me. And I'm like, okay, I can't argue with that
Yeah.
logic. I mean, it makes sense. But at the same time, it's like 88,000. This kid was like 21 years old. I never made
That's,
$88,000
yeah.
my entire career as a police officer
Exactly.
in a
You
year.
could set up a whole new life somewhere with that
Exactly.
money. Yeah, it's just, and that's crazy. And I know that's not what the topic is, but it is, yeah, it's, and I think that's the thing is that we try to inspire people and bring people up and give them, and hopefully people will hear this episode and know that, if you're doing those types of things, you don't have to, right? Just because that's the opportunity that was presented to you, you don't have to sling dope. You don't have to, promote hookers or whatever it may be. You can go legitimate, still make decent money and not have to worry about looking over your shoulder the rest of your life.
Exactly. Exactly. And
Yeah.
that's the scary thing. I mean,
But,
like I said,
yeah. And that leads to the next thing, though, too, Terry, is that even though, in your life, right, you've had some great opportunities, but now, you've been battling cancer for over a decade. And, how do you even process that, let alone turn it into something positive like you have?
yeah. So just a little bit of background. 2012, I had a callus break open on the bottom of my left foot, right below my third toe. And I was a basketball coach at the time. So initially, I didn't think much of it because as a coach, you're on your feet a lot. But after a few weeks of it not healing, I made an appointment, went to see a podiatrist, a foot doctor friend of mine. And he takes an x-ray and he says, Terry, I think you have a cyst in there and I can cut it out. And he does. And he shows it to me, just a little gelatin sac with some white fat in it, no dark spots, no blood, nothing that gives either one of us concern. But fortunately or unfortunately, he sends it off to pathology. And Nathan, 2 weeks later, I get the call from him. And as I mentioned, he's a friend of mine. And the more difficulty he's having explaining to me what's going on, the more frightened I am becoming. until finally he just lays it out for me. He says, Terry, I've been a doctor for 25 years and I have never seen the form of cancer you have. You have an incredibly rare form of melanoma. Most people think of melanoma as too much exposure to
Yeah.
the sun affects
Like
the
like my
melanin.
bald head in the sun. Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. Right. Pigment in our skin. He said, yours has nothing to do with sun exposure. It's a rare form that appears on the bottom of the feet or the palms of the hands. And so he recommended I go to MD Anderson Cancer Center in Houston to be treated. And I was. They excised the tumor on the bottom of my foot. They took out all my lymph nodes. And then Nathan, they looked at me and said, more than likely, you'll be dead in 2 years because we have nothing to offer you. And I thought, okay, how can I turn this death sentence into a life sentence? And that was really the start of the journey. And I've come to realize, how do I keep doing this? How do I keep going? I had my left foot amputated in 2018, my left leg amputated in the middle of COVID in 2020. I have tumors in my lungs. How do you do that? You realize that this is something bigger than me. I have a very strong faith in God. And I honestly believe that God is using my infirmity, my malignancy, to show people his love, his mercy, his grace, his peace, his healing. And that to me keeps me going. That keeps me going through the trial drugs and the side effects and all that kind of stuff. Because like I said, I think this is something bigger than me.
Yeah, and not only that, but you said this was what, 2012 that this all started, and they said 2 years, and here we are in 2025. So obviously, I hate to say it, but God's not done with you yet, Terry.
And that's,
He's
that's
keeping
what
you
I
here
feel.
for a reason. Yeah. And
I'm here for a reason.
exactly. And one thing that I loved, like a key takeaway that I had for you, is it's not about the diagnosis; it's about how you respond. And I think that that's such a powerful thing, because you could take a diagnosis like that and just essentially lay down and die, right? I mean, that you saw no options, but you responded to it in a different way. And this comes back to what we were talking about earlier, right? Everything has a consequence, whether it be good or bad. And you took that consequence, and it's probably nothing to your problem, right? Nothing you did that caused this, but you took what happened to you and you became accountable for it and said, you know what? I'm not going to let this define who I am. I'm going to use it to push me up and to help others. And I think that's amazing.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. You realize that this is bigger than you. And I've had all 88 genes that doctors know of or suspect all 88 genes looked at that doctors know of cause every form of cancer that we know of. And I have absolutely no mutations in any of those genes that would predispose me to not only this cancer, but any kind of cancer.
Yeah.
In my life, which one is good because I can at least let my daughter know, hey, you're not,
Yeah.
you're not susceptible.
You probably won't get this, hopefully, right?
Exactly. But you're right. I mean, there's nothing I did, but obviously I'm supposed to learn something. I've always felt that nobody suffers in vain. There's a reason. There's something you're supposed to learn from the adversity, whatever it is, from the journey that you go on through that adversity. You're supposed to learn something, but people don't. And Nathan, one of the things I used to ask myself every day when I got up is, do you want to live? And I know for probably most people who are healthy that are listening, it's like, well, of course I want to live. But there are a lot of people, like you say, that find out that they have this terminal diagnosis and a doctor says, hey, you're going to be dead in 2 years. And Nathan, I've seen those people. I've seen those people literally die on the 2-year anniversary that doctor gave them. I've always wanted my life to be based on the decisions that I made, not on the ones I didn't make or that somebody else made for me. So I think one of the things for me was I wanted to have something to look forward to. I wanted to, hey, God, I want to see my daughter graduate from high school. I want to see my daughter graduate from college. I want to walk her down the aisle on her wedding day. And Nathan, I just found out yesterday that I'm going to be a grandfather. So, and I want to
congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's those things that you've got to have something to look forward to. If you just are living in the moment, and I'm not saying you shouldn't live in the moment, but you've got to have something to look forward to. It keeps you moving forward.
Yeah. And I love that you said that because I think a lot of us too, even without a terminal diagnosis, right? We'll sit there and think, something bad will happen to us. Like a month ago, I lost my job and I could have very easily sat there and said, oh, woe is me. This is terrible. What's going to happen? But I realized that God's got a bigger plan for me. Maybe this gives me another opportunity to go out into another field that maybe I haven't tried before. Or maybe I keep doing the same thing. Whatever he presents to me, I'm going to take and I'm going to run with it. And, just like you said, you can't sit there and live in that moment all the time. It's important to take, to acknowledge it and to take it in and realize, yes, we have to realize and deal with what we're being presented to us. But we also know that we could be so much more than that. And that's why I think, like when I said before, you're more than you're more than a diagnosis. It's what you do with it. And, this is a perfect example, but setting your mindset, Terry, what is there one thing, or I don't want to call it a trick, but is there one way that you put your mindset that you leaned on, to keep going forward?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things, but I'll give something to people that's fairly easy. Not a lot of people will do it, but I do it every day of my life, and it's this: every day, do one thing at least that scares you, that makes you nervous, that makes you uncomfortable, that's potentially embarrassing. It doesn't have to be a big thing. But if you do those small things every day, when the big disasters in life hit us, and they hit all of us, we lose somebody who's
Yeah.
close to us. Like you said, you get let go from your job unexpectedly, you find out you have a chronic or a terminal illness, you will be so much more resilient to handle those things. So, I mean, well, what am I talking about? When you finish your shower, turn the handle all the way cold and take a cold shower. I mean, the science is still out on whether cold therapy works, but there's
Right.
some science that says that it does. So it'll make, and it's terribly uncomfortable. But doing those uncomfortable things, doing exercises when I've just had drug therapy and I'm exhausted and stuff like that. It's doing those uncomfortable things that allow me to take this drug therapy that makes me shake and throw up and have a headache and fever and all that
Oh,
kind of
yeah.
every day because I'm used to the uncomfortableness. That uncomfortableness allows you to do things that are more uncomfortable. It sounds very easy. Like, what, okay, 33% of Americans hit the snooze button twice every morning. That's a half hour of time. What if you didn't hit the snooze button? What could you do with 30 more minutes in
Oh, my
your,
goodness. Yeah.
I want to learn to play the guitar, whatever it is you want to do. That's 30 minutes. And we know from studying sleep that 15 minutes and then that next 15 minutes, it doesn't help you to
It
rest.
actually makes you more tired.
It
Yeah.
makes you worse. So get the heck up and use that 30 minutes to meditate, to exercise, to do whatever to journal, whatever you feel
Yeah.
will help you. But people are complacent. I mean, you know this.
Yeah. And you know what, Terry? That's a great point because I've noticed that sometimes in my life where I sit there and say, oh, well, I really don't have the time for this. But it's like, no, we have the time. We just have to make it. So maybe it's not me sitting on my butt watching TV in the evening, right? That's some time that's really not time that needs to be spent there, right? Or maybe it's, like you said, hitting that snooze button a couple of times. That gives you an extra 30 minutes a day if you do that, just like you pointed out, instead of driving to work, maybe you walk to work so that you get a little bit more healthier, if you're within a walking distance in a safe neighborhood, obviously, but, these are all things that you can do. And I think that's one of the things we get stuck into, especially as, possibly Americans, is that we say we don't have any time, but in reality, we probably got a lot more than we think we do.
We waste a ton of time. I mean, think how much time we waste on just the devices that we have, our
Oh my
phones,
goodness,
our
yeah.
iPads, our computers and things like that. And you're right. I mean, people will talk about a television show. My wife and I rarely turn the television. She'll turn it on, like when she's making dinner just to watch the news. What's the weather going to be tomorrow and stuff like that. But that's the only time that I don't. I mean, I love sports growing up. I don't watch sports anymore. I mean, I spend my time reading, improving,
Yeah.
getting better and things like that. And I've seen so many people in my life, and I'm not gonna poo poo, you
Right.
basically working on your body. But we know this body is someday going to die. It's going to decay. It's going to turn to dust. But the heart, the mind, the soul, that's who we really are. A lot of times we think we're a body that has a soul. I look at it just the other way. We're a soul
We're a soul that has a body. Yep.
Why not spend time every day working on your heart, your mind, and your soul, Those things are eternal. Those things will live on. And I don't think we spend nearly as much time working on them as we do working on this physical
Yeah.
exterior of our bodies.
E Exactly, and, that's something that I found out, and I told my wife this today, being laid off for a month now. This is the first time in my entire life, Terry, that I have not had a job since I was 14 years old. So in 30 years, this is the first time I haven't had a job, and I have to tell you, the first 2 weeks were tough, because if you're probably just like me, we're go-getters. We go, go, go. We're always working, always doing something, and the first 2 weeks were terrible because I was like, I don't know what to do with myself. Then all of a sudden, the honey-do list came out, and now it's the honey-done list, so it's like, and I'm sitting back and going, wow, this is all stuff that I could have done, over the last couple of years, but I always said I didn't have time. And now I knew I had the time and I did it and I feel better about it. I just feel better overall because I've had time to just sit back and relax for a minute, but still do things that are positive. And, just like you said, it's, if we take our time and use it wisely, we're the same way. We don't watch television as much. My wife and I, we've been taking advantage of the time and doing a bunch of hikes outdoors and enjoying God's creation and just seeing all these things. And that, like you said, that helps heal your heart. It helps, feed your brain. And those are things that are, and I love that you said that we are a soul that has a body as opposed to a body that has a soul, because you're absolutely right. This body is guaranteed to, we start dying from the day we're born. That's the only thing, what do they say? Two things that are inevitable in life: taxes and death. So, but yeah, I love the fact that you do that. But, you've also led teams as a coach in business, even in, hostage situations like we talked. But what do you see as the secret sauce to leadership that maybe helped you into this new life of yours?
Yeah, it's interesting. There's something I read that said 163 of the Fortune 500 CEOs at one time were members of the United States Marine Corps. I'm like, okay, so the Marines have got to be doing something right. They're producing those kind of leaders. So I went back and started reading books and stuff like that about Marines and what their code of conduct, and it's like once a Marine, always a Marine. So you may be out of the Marine Corps for 50 years, but you know what? You're a Marine. And
you're still a Marine.
Exactly. And they instill that in you, that for the rest of your life, you will be this individual. We expect this out of you. I'll give you a quick story. When our daughter unfortunately, she got my height. So she's 6'3" and she has an NBA 3-point shooting range. And that's why she went to the Air Force Academy. They recruited her to play basketball. But I remember we went on our visit. And I remember during part of the visit, we were taken into a conference room, the assistant coach, myself, and her. And all of a sudden, this Air Force colonel comes in, full dress uniform, medals all over his chest. And he introduces himself and he has a sit down. He sits down across the table and he starts talking to our dog. And I won't go through the whole speech, but the thing that really got me was he said, if you come here and you graduate, he said, for the rest of your life, watch people's chins when they know you're a graduate of the Air Force Academy. He said, their chins will go up. Will be like, he said, because they will expect more of you as a leader. They will expect more of you as an individual. Honestly, Nathan, when this guy finished talking, I was ready to run through the wall. I was like, where do I sign? Can I please come here? But, it was our daughter's decision. And I'm sitting there as a dad thinking, oh my God, this is such a great opportunity for you to play Division I basketball, to get an amazing education that will set you up for the rest of your life. But I can't make that decision for you. I've got to let you decide that. And, the Air Force Academy is about an hour from where we live. And so, we were driving back and I was so resisting. Don't try to coach her, where she wants to go.
Yeah.
She's got to come to this decision. It's a huge decision in her life. She's got to come to this decision. And so, she was kind of quiet on the way home. She talked about a lot of things we saw at the academy, which is pretty cool. It set right into the Rocky Mountains and stuff like that. And so we drove home. We're sitting at dinner, her mom, and she's like, I don't think I can pass up this opportunity. Even if I don't make it, this is something that I have to try. And so many young people are like, I'm not going to do something hard. And she even made the comment. She said, I'm going to do the hard things now so that it will set me up for success in life when I'm older. And I'm like, how many 18-year-old kids know? I mean, when I was 18, my dad's like, you're going to major in business. Okay, Dad, whatever you say. I had no idea what I wanted to major in college. I did it because my dad told me. But our daughter saw the potential in this opportunity and took it. And I can't tell you, Nathan, how proud I am.
And you know what? And that's such an amazing thing because like you said, 18-year-olds I don't think they think of the long term, but when you're 18 and you decide I'm going to do the hard part now, you're actually setting yourself up for success because when you get older, like, you and I are, Terry, now, it's a lot harder to do the hard thing. Your body is not as capable as it was when you were 18 years old. So yeah, if you can do it while you're young.
Exactly. Just the opportunity. I mean, she just came off of being a squadron combat commander. She's 28 years old. She was responsible for 70 people. How many 28-year-olds get that responsibility?
Yeah.
To oversee that many people? It's like the opportunities you get in the military. And I'm not, it's got to be for you. It's a special kind of life, just like being a cop is a special kind of life.
Yep,
It's got to be
absolutely.
for you. But the opportunities that you get. And my daughter, she gets kind of salty when people go, well, I can't afford to go to college. Sure you can. You can go in the military.
Yeah.
Because if
Go
you go
in the military.
military,
Absolutely. They'll
we'll
pay
give you
for
money
it.
to go to college. Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And it's like there are ways, but you got to want to, nothing easy. The easy stuff in life, everybody does. The hard stuff that people don't do, that's what separates kind of the wheat from the chaff, so to speak.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And, and her leadership has got to be, like for me, leadership. And one of the things, so the career field that I've been in since being a police officer is a scrum master. Most people hear that and they go, I have no idea what that is. So I just tell you, hey, it's a project manager for IT, right? But one of the big things of that is what they call servant leadership, and that's always been a big thing for me, whether it was in the police force, whether it's, being in project management, is I'm here to guide you and direct you in the way that we need to go, but I'm here to serve you as well. You're my people. You're the people that I'm going to look after. And if I see something wrong, I'm going to call it out. And I don't mean like you're doing something wrong, but if there's something from the company side that just doesn't jiving right with the folks, then I'm going to call that out to leadership. And I'm going to say, hey, look, these people are being overworked, or look, they're working till 9, 10 o'clock at night. And we're supposed to be an 8 to 5 employer. And it's like, I have to commend their abilities, but at some point they're going to burn out and go somewhere else, so you have to protect your people as well. And I think that's a big part of leadership is it's about serving others, not just directing them,
You're right. And I'm sure you've seen this because I know I saw it when I was in the private sector, there's a problem. And so the boss gathers everybody around, a conference table or you're on the shop floor, whatever it is, and then sits down and says, all right, here's the problem, kind of lays out the problem. Now, this can go one of two ways. It can either go this way. The boss says, here's the problem, and here's how I see it being fixed, and lays out the way he or she feels that it's going to be fixed. And then says, okay, I'd like to hear everybody else's opinion. Now, unless you're an absolute idiot and want to get fired, you're not going to say anything different than what the boss says. You're going to back up whatever the boss said. That's one way of handling. A better way of handling, I think, is if the boss comes in, sits down, lays out the problem, and then goes silent and says, how do you think it can be?
Absolutely.
Fixed? Now the people are willing to, okay, hey, he wants to know what I think. I'm close to this problem. I got some great ideas and stuff like that. And we see more, I think, of the first part because I'm the boss. I should be able to fix the problem. And I mean, that's one of the things in the Marine Corps, they talk about, leaders eat last. So you're going to make sure, like you said, my people are taken care of. But also you're going to say, okay, Nathan, here's the mission. I am giving you the mission. I want you to go and make a plan for the mission and then come back to me and say, Terry, I need X, Y, and Z in order to accomplish that mission.
Exactly.
I'm going to give you X, Y, and Z. And then periodically, I'm going to check in with you. How's it going? How are things? I'm not going to micromanage you. I'm not going to stand over your shoulder and say, well, why are you doing it that way? You should be doing it this way. And that's, I think, where the Marines do such a great job of it. They've figured out how we operate as human beings, how we think, how we best utilize our talents. And then they implement that. And like I said, you don't sit over somebody's shoulder and tell them how to do the job. You don't do all the things that tick us off when people do that to us. And that's what makes Marines such great leaders. And I think that's why so many people in the Marine Corps end up going out and starting great companies.
Yeah, and Terry, a great point to that too is a private sector, Marine Corps, whatever it may be, is usually when we get promoted, right, we get removed from being the individual contributor, right? We're not contributing to the everyday work as much. And when we don't contribute as much, we get disconnected, right? So we don't really fully understand what's going on. So when we as leaders just sit there and say, hey, here's the problem and this is how I want it fixed, you really have no idea what's going on today, what, tools, technology, whatever it may be available to be better. You're just basing it based on what you did, and it could be 20 years ago, right, Terry, that you were working in that individual contributor. And obviously in 20 years, a lot changes. So and that was one of my things to say, well, I hear what you guys are saying and it makes sense to go that way, but let's take it to the team. Let's hear what the team has to say. Let's present the problem to the team and find out what creative solutions they can come up with. Because in the end, that's what we want is the solution. It doesn't really matter how we get there. Obviously, we don't want it to be illegal, immoral, or unsafe. But, how we get there, as long as we get there, that's the key. And if we can do it in a way that supports our teams and enables them to be the best that they can be, we're only going to succeed. And I think a lot of people miss that.
And you're right. And, when my daughter got this combat squadron job, we were talking and she said, what do you think I should do? I said, I think the first thing you should do is go on a listening tour and just go around to people and ask them 3 questions. What are we doing right? What are we doing wrong? What can we do better? And then you will have a very good idea of how everybody feels, and you'll probably get common themes. Here's what everybody thinks we're doing right. Here's what everybody thinks we're doing wrong. Here's what everybody thinks we can do better. And I said, and then start with the low-hanging fruit. I mean, they'll
Absolutely.
want credibility.
Yeah, we call it in the business world the $5 fix, right?
Exactly, right. And start that way. And like I said, to have that ability at such a young age to learn
Yes.
about yourself and to learn how to lead others. Gosh, Nathan, it would be a tremendous opportunity for every young person to in some way be able to do that.
Absolutely. And Terry, you brought something up because I have a lot of friends in military. Did a little bit of time in ROTC in college, so I learned a lot from non-commissioned officers. But I have a lot of friends that are officers, and I always ask them. I say, when you first became an officer, what did you do? And the first thing they always say is, I went to my NCOs and said, what have you been doing? What have you seen that works? What have you seen that doesn't work? What do you want to change? And that to me is a great thing, because instead of just coming in, especially when you see, second lieutenants come in, they get their first platoon or whatever, and they want to change things. It's like the best advice I ever heard was, no, talk to the sergeants, your NCOs that have been there already, find out what's working, find out what's not, and then work with them to make it better for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so important, the people that have been there, there's sort of leaders. When I was coaching basketball, a lot of times you pick captains based on, okay, you two people are seniors, you're going to be the captains. I used to have this 10-question questionnaire, and it basically would say things like, if there was a problem on the team, who would you talk to? And it gave 3 lines, 1, 2, 3, first person, second person, third person. And I would assign, 3 points for being in the first spots, 2 points for the second, 1 point for the third. And then I would add up at the end what everybody thought. And Nathan, a lot of times I picked captains who were juniors, because based on what everybody told me, those were the real leaders on the team. Those were the people who would hold people accountable. Those were the people who would push people when they were, it's like, hey, we don't do that around here. They set the culture and things like that. That's what I wanted. You didn't get to be captain just because longevity. You'd been there for 4 years and you were going to be a captain.
Yeah, how many times you probably saw in the police department, right, where people get picked because of seniority, right, as opposed to their work ethic. So we see it all the time. But I love that you bring that up, because it's like, just because you've been there for a long time doesn't mean you're going to be a good leader. And there's a difference between a manager and a leader, I believe. Yes. Anybody can manage. It truly takes skill to lead, I think. I think we could teach people to lead. Right? People say, "Oh, leaders born." I believe some leaders are born, but I also believe we can create leaders, because we now have a lot more emotional intelligence, whatever that word's for. We have a lot more education. We have a lot more insights into life to where we can teach people how to be better leaders. But I think there's a big difference between a leader and a manager. If you look at those things, because anybody can manage something, but it takes quite a lot of skill and soul, essentially, to be a leader.
It does. And there's kind of an old story, and I mean, it's old. Do you remember Wilt Chamberlain at all?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. Wilt Chamberlain, basketball player back in the 50s and 60s. Wilt Chamberlain was signed by the Los Angeles Lakers to play basketball. And I can't remember his first name, but Von Bredekoff was the coach. And a reporter asked Wilt at the press conference, said, how do you think Von Bredekoff should handle you as a player? And Wilt said, I'm a human being. You don't handle human beings. You work with or you manage human beings. So I'm not going to be handled by anybody. I'm going to work with people to obviously be as successful as we can as a basketball team. And I thought that was a good point. I mean, a lot of times, we treat people kind of like we treat dogs. It's like, no, we have
You're right.
to work,
Yeah.
we have to work together. And that was one thing as a coach. And I think this is an incredibly important point for leadership. As a coach, if you're a good coach, there are players that when they mess up, you need to yell at them. There are players that mess up that all you need to do is look at them. And then there are other players you don't need to do a thing to them because they're going to be 10 times harder on themselves than you're going to be on them. But the nuance on that, is understanding what works for each player. It's kind of like the definition of, what is it? Knowledge and wisdom. Knowledge is knowing that a tomato is a fruit. Wisdom is knowing you don't put it in a fruit salad. It's
Exactly. Yes.
that kind of thing.
Yeah, I love that, Terry.
But it's true. It's that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I know that, hey, when you mess up, I got to yell at you. But when this guy messes up, I don't need to say a word. I don't even need to look at it because they know they messed up and they're going to fix it. And that's the nuance of a leader. And in kind of a nutshell, that's really kind of what we've been talking about.
Yeah. And it's funny that you say that because that's where I wanted to go to next is, part of being a leader is having some patience. And I have to assume you being a SWAT negotiator, there's probably some tense negotiation moments that taught you some patience in that time, didn't it?
Yeah, I mean, there was so much that I learned being a SWAT negotiator. I'll give you one of the big things is they gave us a formula on how we as human beings communicate with each other. And the formula was 73855. And I'll tell you what the formula means, and then I'll tell you why they gave it to us. So 7% of how we as human beings communicate a message are the words that we use. And think how many times you've said something, be like, oh, wish I hadn't have said it that way, or I wish I would have said it differently. That's only 7% of how that message comes across. 38% is the tone of voice that you use with that message. Are you talking real fast and you can't wait to tell the person you're talking like this? Or you're kind of doing the Eeyore from Winnie the Pooh,
Right. Why am I here?
Terrible. Exactly. And then 55% of how that message is communicated. So more than half is your body language and your facial expressions. And the reason they gave that to us was because they wanted us to understand that if somebody was barricaded with a gun in a room, I was not in the room with that person.
Right.
That would not have been safe. So
not at all.
We didn't have the luxury of saying something to somebody and then see them kind of roll their eyes like, oh, what an idiot. I can't believe Terry said that to me. But we had to figure things out, certainly based on what people were saying, but also what they weren't saying and how they were saying it. And that is, so that was one of the big things. The other thing that we used, and I think everybody can use this today, we called it tactical empathy. I think you can get rid of the word tactical and just call it empathy. So when I would start out with somebody, if I was negotiating with you, Nathan, I wouldn't say, I'm Officer Tucker or I'm Sergeant Tucker. I would say, hi, I'm Terry. What's your name? A lot of times it'd be like, you don't even know a name. Okay, what would you like me to call you? And the reason we did that, and again, what we're trying to do, and as a cop, sometimes you get on scene, you're like, I have no idea why we're here. I have no idea what's going on here.
It's a civil issue.
Exactly. Right. Like a lawyer, I'm going to, and so you get to a point where you want to understand. Help me understand what's going on. Help me understand why we're here today. Help me understand why we're talking. And the important word there is understand. I mean, if you were a homicide suspect that just murdered 3 people, I wasn't going to be like, oh yeah, totally agree that you should have done that. It's that understanding because understanding leads to trust and trust gets hopefully us to a point where I can get you out safely. And think about any relationship, any good relationship that you have in your life, parent, child, husband, wife, boss, subordinate. If trust isn't the underpinning of all that, it's not a good relationship.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. And, it's funny because I can relate to everything you're saying because most of my time in the police force, I was a crisis intervention officer, so I would get, and I was one of few at the time, so I would get a lot of the, mental health calls. But for me, it was just like you said, establishing that trust. Obviously I go in and they'd see me in a uniform, so obviously there's an authoritarian type situation there. But I didn't come in and say, hey, this is Officer Bollman, what's going on today? I'd say, hey, I'm Nate. Let's talk. Let's see what's going on. How are you feeling today? What's is there anything that's causing issues for you? Is there something that I can do to help you out? Do I need to back off? Do I need to just give you some time to sit alone and then we'll come talk again in 15 minutes? Whatever it may be. But you're right. That trust is what's really key. And I know some people that might be thinking this, like, oh, we're SWAT and police. But the idea is that we really do want to have the trust of the person, because in the end, and I think you believe this too, Terry, we're all human beings. We might just be in a bad situation. It might just be one of those situations that we can't handle on our own and we need help from someone else. And that's where, folks like you and I come in, because I think that there's, some people, let's be honest, some people are in the police profession for the wrong reasons,
yes.
For power trips. But I think the majority of us are there to actually help people. And even though we are seeing you on your worst day, we want to try to make that day a little bit better. Even though you may end up in the back of the police car, we want to make sure that you're safe, and we want to make sure that, you can have an opportunity to learn from this situation and hopefully move forward. And if we can do anything to help that, that's definitely what we want to do.
Absolutely. And that's, that was one of the hardest things to, I'm not here to kick ass and take names. That's not
exactly
what it's about, because I'll eventually run into somebody who's bigger, stronger, faster, better than me, and I'm going to get hurt, or I'm going to get somebody else hurt. So, I always used to say, and I had a female partner for a number of years. I always thought women made better cops than men because they were willing to talk people into handcuffs, where, guys were like, all right, come on, let's go. And it's like, I don't want to fight with you. I'm going to get hurt if I fight with you.
Exactly. That's the last thing I want. My thing was, the best tool on my belt is not on my belt. It's on my face. It's my mouth. Yep.
Your mouth and your brain.
My mouth and my brain. Because the thing is, the last thing I want to do is fight with you. And absolutely the last thing I ever want to have to do is draw my gun and use it. None of us want to do that. I don't think, if there is a cop out there who wants to do it and you're listening to this, you might want to find another profession, because that's not why we're here. That's just the last line of defense to protect others and ourselves. But you're absolutely right. Our mouth is our best weapon, and our brain as well. Some folks have more, knowledge and intellect than others, but I still think everybody's capable in that job. And whatever position. I know we talked a lot about police because you and I both relate to it a lot, but this can go to any profession. Using your mouth, talking, listening is a huge thing too. How many times do we not listen to people and just assume going into a situation that we know what's right? Stop yourself, listen,
And that's incredibly important, and that's what we wanted to do, and probably you as well, when you were dealing with people that were in crisis. They're so hyped, they're so amped up, whether they're on drugs or whether they're not. You want to burn off a lot of that emotional energy. And, we used to always say that, think about what we did kind of as when you were a kid, you'd go to the park and you'd play on a teeter-totter or a seesaw, whatever you called it. When you started negotiating with a person, their emotional brain was way up in the air and their rational brain was down on the ground. And over time, by asking how and what questions and mirroring and parroting and all that kind of stuff, you get that, you have them burn off that emotional energy. So you get that teeter-totter to equilibrium.
Absolutely.
And then through more discussion, you get to the point where the rational brain is up in the air and the emotional brain is down to the ground. That's the time we could talk about solutions. Put the gun down, let the hostages go, come out safely. When you're yelling and screaming and ranting and raving, I'm not going to say, hey, you should put the gun down, or that's not the time you do that. So it's an understanding. That's why negotiation, that's why what you did took so long, because you needed the person to burn off a lot of that emotional energy so you could get to the point where they're talking with their rational brain, because we know this. You make better decisions for yourself with your rational brain than you do with your emotional.
Absolutely. And we see that all over the world nowadays, where people react with their emotions as opposed to what we would call common sense. Or like you said, I love it even better with the rational brain, right? Because not all sense is common, but rational, right? What most people would consider as rational. But yeah, Terry, I love that part of the conversation, because I think it hopefully it'll tell a lot of people that, give them some sights when you're dealing with somebody that might be, a little up in arms or talking, irrationally, as we would speak. Let them get that out. Let them get that out before you start trying to talk rationality. It's the same thing we used to always say with drunks, right? You can't reason with a drunk, so what do? You wait till they sober up, because I guarantee you what I'm telling you while you're drunk right now, you're probably not going to remember anyway. So let's just wait till you sober up, because there's no arguing with a drunk. And it's the same thing. I don't want to say there's no getting through to someone that's being emotional, emotional because there's definitely different levels of emotionality with folks, and it could just be a little bit of emotion and you can still maybe talk them, within that. But if they're really emotional, yeah, let them get their emotion out, let them talk about it, let them feel for a little bit, then bring it back down, get it back to that rational level. And then you can start having those good discussions, really get to the root of the problem and hopefully help someone out. And I think anybody could take, this is not just police work. This is in anything in life, because let me tell you, if you're dealing with people, you're going to deal with emotions.
You are. And one of the things, even from a civilian point of view, and I still do this, the more a person talks, the more information you receive. So even if you're in a boardroom and, you're trying to close a deal or something like that, and somebody says something, a great retort is, it seems like you have a reason for saying that. And
Yes.
then go silent. And I'm sure you'll agree. Silence is one of our greatest tools. Going silent. We don't like silence as human beings. So we will fill the silence. So by you saying, seems like you have a reason for saying that, and going quiet, the other person will start to talk. And the more they talk, the more information they give you. And the more information they give you, the better off you're able to say, I get their problem. And, if you're in a boardroom, I get their problem and I can devise my product or service to be a solution to their problem.
Yes.
But you've got to let them get it out. You've got to get them to a point. And I know what we're talking about sounds kind of manipulative, and in a way it is, but at the same time, it's an effective tool, I guess, in your tool belt. Like you and I talked, we wore those tool belts, but it's an effective tool to use to get people to give you more information, which hopefully will help them and also help you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I did that even in, my project management Scrum Master jobs. Was we would do retrospectives every so many weeks so we could look back at the work we did, see what we did well, see what didn't go well, and maybe, bring out ideas that we could maybe improve our efficiency and things like that. And that was one thing my boss always told me I was good at. And this probably came from the police force, but he's like, you're good at asking the hard questions and then leaving the awkward silence. He goes, because from the awkward silence comes great ideas.
Yeah. And that's, we would be on a 10-hour SWAT call up, exhausted, and it didn't matter. We would always go back and debrief what went right, what went wrong, what could we have done differently. So the next time we do it, we'll be better prepared. And that's the time to do it. It's not, hey, in a week we'll get together. No, what went right. That person talked over you on the radio or whatever it ended up being. It's like, no, that's a problem. We got to either have an alternate channel or whatever it ends up being. You got to have a solution right there.
Yep. Absolutely. And Terry, I'd be remiss if we didn't talk a little bit more about this, but let's talk about Motivational Check, because I know your site's got daily thoughts and blog posts, but what's kind of the vibe that you're going for with Motivational Check?
Yeah, it was just to put things out there that I have learned with the understanding that, hey, I don't have all the answers to life, but you know what? I'm 65 years old. I've learned a lot of things in my life that I wanted to offer to people. So that was the start of it. And then I've written 2 books now. And it's like, Nathan, if you would have told me when I was in high school that I would have written like a paper, let alone a book, I would have told you were absolutely nuts. But it was, what can I offer to people? How can I make a difference? A lot of times in life, we talk about our purpose. And I think you and I have talked about, our purpose, not using that word. And I think a lot of times we talk about that word in the singular, like it's one thing. And I know for me, it's plural. I can't speak for anybody else. But for me, when I was younger, I know my purpose was to be an athlete. That was what I was supposed to do. And then as I got into adulthood, I always felt my purpose was to be in law enforcement. And now, in all honesty, I'm probably coming towards the end of my life. I think my purpose has changed again, to put as much goodness, positivity, motivation, love back into the world. And that's really what Motivational Check has been about. I write a blog, that I put up every Monday. Like, what do you write about? Whatever I feel like. Whatever I think. I think everybody should have a writing practice. It helps you clarify your thoughts. Well, what do you think about this? I don't know. Well, start writing it down.
Yeah.
I always tell people, if you're overwhelmed by something, take a piece of paper, write down everything that's bothering, everything, get everything out on that piece of paper, and then go through and cross out everything that you have no control over. Whatever's left on that piece of paper are things you can work on. But that's where I think we go off the rails. We get to a point where I'm trying to control all this stuff that I have no control over, only control the things that you can control. And that's really kind of what I've been trying to do with Motivational.
And Terry, I think it's funny coming from a former cop that, you're like, talk about the things that you can't control, because in our profession, right, that was our job. We had to control the situation. So it's very hard for those of us that are in these, and I have to say the military as well, right? You have to control the situation you're in, because it can be life or death. And I think when we get out, and I don't know if your transition was difficult when you got out of law enforcement, but I know for me it was, to realize that not everything was a life and death situation. When I'm sitting in the boardroom with the executive and I don't have to make a decision in 2 seconds. Guess what? I could wait a day or two and then give them an answer, So it is, it's funny for those of you that are out there that, have problems with control, realize that, yes, you can control the things you can control. And hey, I'm all in favor of that. If you can control it, by all means, but you have to, like Terry said here, you have to realize the things that you can't control. And just, for you and I, Terry, obviously we probably give those things to God, right? And say, hey, God, just guide us on what we could do here. But for others, find your higher power, whether it be God or not, and give it to something that you could just say, you know what, this is out of my control. I'm going to just take a step back, and whatever will be, will be.
Yeah. And I certainly have learned that through cancer. I have no control over this.
Right.
And it was one thing, I used to get what I would call scanxiety. So it was, anxiety over the scan that I was going to get. Where's the cancer? Is it gotten better? Has it gotten worse? Whatever. And that really kind of crystallized for me one day when my oncologist said, understand this, wherever the cancer is in your body, it's been there since day one. It's been there since before you were even diagnosed with it. He said, we've got great technology, MRIs, CAT scans, PET scans, all these kind of things. He said, but the bottom line is we're limited. We can only see a tumor the size of a garden pea, which is about 1 billion cells, if you think, which kind of like 1 billion. So are you kidding me? He said, but nothing you're going to do is going to cause that cancer to go somewhere. So don't think that you have some control over that. Nathan, that was such a weight lifted off me. It's like, I'm trying to control a PET scan. How the heck am I going to do that? But being a cop, you want to control the situation.
You do.
I want to control it.
Yeah.
And by him saying that, it was like, I have no control over these scans. Whatever it's going to be is what it's going to be. Nothing I'm going to do is
we'll deal with it afterwards, right?
Yeah,
absolutely. We'll do what we can, and what we can't, we'll leave to God. And
exactly.
and that's all. I mean, it is hard because obviously, you've lived a long life. You've got a grandchild on the way. So obviously, I'm sure that's probably a new prayer, is to make sure that you get to see the grandchild born. And, but I have to see that it's definitely got to be tough. But, how do you keep going forward knowing all this stuff? How do you stay motivated to, keep pumping out everything that's on your website?
Honestly, it goes back to what we were talking before. This is bigger than me. This is something I don't think about dying. When I found out I had cancer in my leg, I was going to have it amputated. I also found out I had tumors in my lungs. I actually went with my wife to the mortuary, to the cemetery, to the church, and I planned my funeral. And because I give talks in person and I go on podcasts and talk about this stuff with nice people like you, I actually got some pushback from people who commented that planning my funeral was in some way defeatist. And I was like, wait a minute. As far as I'm concerned, as far as I know, everybody's going to die. As far as I know, nobody's working on a cure for life right now.
Right.
Every one of us is going to die, but not every one of us is going to truly live. And I heard a Native American Blackfoot saying years ago that I absolutely love. And it went like this. It said, when you were born, you cried and the world rejoiced. Live your life in such a way so that when you die, the world cries and you rejoice. That's what I want. That's what I'm looking for.
I love that, Terry. That's amazing, because you're absolutely right. And I love the fact too that you said, not everybody lives. Even though we're alive, not everybody lives. And you're right. We have to take those opportunities as they come to us. Don't put work first. I mean, I hate to say this, and I know, especially while I'm looking for a job, don't put work first, because at the end, like I saw and many people see, is if something goes wrong and they need to save money, they're going to cut you one way or the other, So it's like you can't control everything, but what you can control is what you positively do with your life and the opportunities that you create, not only for yourself, but for others. And that's one of the things that, I love having you on here, because someone can hear this and say, wow, Terry had this amazing career. He's been battling cancer for 13 years. And instead of giving up, he's not giving up. He's saying, you know what, I'm going to do the best with this that I can. I'm going to share my experiences with you. So hopefully you don't have to go through through them, and maybe you can learn from them, or maybe you could take something away that'll make your life a little bit better. And I think that's really what this world is about for us as humans, is helping each other out, finding some type of purpose, and really helping other human beings. Because in the end, we are all, one thing is guaranteed, is death. And, how we spend that life before that is what really is going to make a difference.
Yeah, and you're right. I mean, we're here for such a short period of time. I mean, we're like a wisp of smoke. I mean, boom, and it's gone. And people don't realize that, especially younger people. It's like, nah, I got my whole life in front of me. I promise you, one day you're going to wake up and it's like, you're 65 years old. And, I think social media, there's a lot of good for social media, but social media allows us to stay on the surface. And there's a professor at the University of Chicago, a psychology professor, who does this experiment with his students. The idea is you go out, you get on a bus, and in 3 questions, you go deep with somebody. So you sit down next to somebody. Hey, how you doing? I'm fine. How are you? Question 1. And I'm just making this up. Question 2, what do you do for a living? Oh, I'm a doctor. Okay. Question 3, have you always wanted to be a doctor? Nathan, it doesn't matter what they tell you. They could say, no, I grew up on a farm. I wanted to be a veterinarian, but X, Y, and Z happened. Or my mom was a doctor, but died of breast cancer when she was 40. So I'm honoring her memory by being a doctor. Whatever they tell you, they're telling you their why, their mission, their purpose in life. And we don't go there with people. We stay on the surface. And, I've been asked, how do you want to be remembered? I don't want to be remembered. I won't be remembered. Like I said, 100 years from now, nobody's going to remember I even existed. But what I want now are those deep, meaningful connections with other human beings. That, for me, is what gets me going, what gets me energized. So that's really kind of what life is about for me right now.
I love that. I love that, Terry. All right, let's lighten things up for a second as we're getting, I've got you. Wow, we're at an hour already. That went really quick. But I have this little segment that I call Do Q&A. So I'm just going to ask you some rapid fire questions just to kind of find out a little bit about yourself, and we'll go from there. But first question for you, basketball or SWAT? What was a tougher gig for you?
Boy, great question. I'm going to say basketball because it was a longer period of time, and a lot of failure in that, a lot of trying to perfect the move and stuff. I'm going to say basketball.
Yeah, I have to imagine basketball was probably the thing that did the number on your knees, right?
Yeah, I had three knee surgeries in high school. I had 1 in college. But I mean, Nathan, I was so I got to play against Michael Jordan. I got to play against Jim Valvano's North Carolina State team the year before they won the national championship. I got to play against so many people. I played high school basketball with Isaiah Thomas. I don't know if you know who that is, but
yeah, oh yeah.
So we played in the same conference. I mean, I was so blessed with basketball, and it gave me something to focus on because I was a 13-year-old, 6'5" kid with a size 14 shoe and ears that Dumbo would have loved from the Disney movie. And I got teased mercilessly. So where could I put that energy that I was so upset that I was getting teased? I could put it into basketball, and it ended up
That's awesome.
getting me a scholarship.
I love that. For you, favorite pump-up song before a big moment?
I don't even know if you're going to know this song. So there's a book called Cyrano de Bergerac, and there's a play and a movie called Man from La Mancha or Man of La Mancha. And there's a song in there that's about the impossible. It's called The Impossible Dream. And it's basically this down and out knight whose sword is bent and all this kind of stuff, who basically won't let, no matter what happens to him, he won't let his honor be defiled. He will do what's right in life. You've played that song for me, and by God, the other song is the theme from the Field of Dreams movie. You want to see a grown man cry? Yeah, play that movie for it'll get me pumped up, but I'll cry doing it.
Yep. I like that. Field of Dreams I can relate to a little bit more because that was a movie that I remember I was like, I'm probably not interested in that. And then you watch it and you're just like, wow, what a great, artistic piece. It really was.
It is.
But Terry, for you, coffee or tea to get you through the day?
Don't drink either, honestly.
No?
And it's funny. I mean, working nights, I never developed.
Yeah, I'm like, how, you know what though? It's funny. I worked nights for years and I never drank coffee. As soon as I went to a regular job doing day shift, I drink coffee every day now.
Yeah. I mean, my daughter was like, she found coffee in like her junior year at the Air Force Academy. She's like, oh my God, my grades would have been so much better if I knew about coffee in my first few years.
Yeah, I was like 30 when I started drinking coffee. It's crazy.
Yeah, I drink water. That's pretty much the only thing I drink.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's good because, who knows what they're putting in our water these days, but for the most part, it's going to be pretty safe. So, What is, and this one's, I guess this is a little bit deeper, but what is one word that you would use to describe your battle with cancer?
Resilient. I mean,
I was going to say, I was listening. I was hoping you would say that because everything I see about you is just about resilience, and just keeping going forward and not letting it get you down. And that's what I love about it, because there's so many people, even myself, we get down on such real easy little things. And here you are battling a thing that is probably going to take your life, right, at some point, but you're still being resilient and living the best way that you can. And, if anybody takes anything from this episode, is that no matter what you're facing, you can always do your best to maybe not overcome it, but to not make it who you are.
You're right. And I guess let me sort of fall on the sword, because I mean, there are days when I feel sorry for myself, when I cry, when I'm down, and things like that.
Yeah.
And when that happens, what are we doing? We're looking inward. Oh, woe is me. Look how terrible it is. Feel sorry for me. And I find a real simple way to get out of that is to go help somebody else. I may be sitting in the waiting room at the infusion center waiting to get treatment. And the newbies, somebody who comes in, got that deer in the headlights look and they're scared to death. And I will just wheel over in my wheelchair and say, yeah, it's like negotiating. Hi, I'm Terry. What's your name? Hey, I know it looks like your first time here. These are the greatest nurses. These are the greatest medical assistants. You're going to be fine. They're going to take great care of you. And all of a sudden then, the person is seen as an individual, not as a number, not as a cancer patient. That other person saw me. Again, going back to what's important to me in life, deep connections. It's making a connection with another person. Get out of that funk. I don't feel as bad. Now all of a sudden, I'm talking with another person. That gets me out of it.
Yeah. And, one thing that I wanted to mention too is that because, obviously we all get in that funk, and that doesn't mean that there's something wrong with that, right? That's just a natural part of being a human being. So yeah, obviously that's going to happen. But when we stay there, that's the problem.
That's
right?
Exactly right.
All right. If you could, going back to your SWAT days, if you could negotiate with anyone in history, and I guess it doesn't have to be a criminal, but who's it going to be?
Jesus Christ, in all honesty.
Yeah. That would be a heck of a talk, wouldn't it?
Yeah. I mean, I'd be on the floor, like, just give me the wisdom, give me anything you got, because anything you say is going to make me better. So, yeah, I mean, I remember there was I was watching something, and, there's a thing, who would you want to have dinner with? The same kind of similar question, if anybody in history. And they ask parents, like, who would you want to have dinner with? And mom and dad are always, Napoleon or, John F. Kennedy, something like that. And then they ask kids the same question. And you know what kids say?
What do they say?
Families, mom and dad. And we think it's got to be somebody famous, but think about, the kids just I just want to have time with mom and dad. I want to sit around the table, have a meal, and have time with mom and dad. And I love that. It's like, gosh, we make it so much more complicated. Be with your family. Be with the people you love. That's what's important.
Absolutely. Terry, what's the best advice you've ever gotten from a coach?
I guess the best advice that I ever got. Let me give you a piece of advice, and then let me give you a piece of advice for your audience.
Okay.
So the best piece of advice I ever got was from my high school basketball coach, who was also an English teacher. And I love to read. And there's a book called Farewell to Arms. It's written by Ernest Hemingway. And it's a semi-autobiographical account of his time as an ambulance driver for the Italian army during World War I. And there's a line in that book that goes like this: life breaks everyone. And afterward, many are stronger at the broken places. And I've never forgotten that. I actually just reread the book last year. It was like, and that's just like if you were to break your arm, doctor puts it in a cast, it heals. Where that break was, your bone will be stronger. That's a metaphor for life. When life beats you to your knees, and it beats all of us to our knees, understand that is making you stronger. If you let it make you stronger, it will allow you to go through that adversity and come out the other side stronger. So that's probably the best piece of advice I got. Let me give you this piece of advice for your audience. It's more important who you work with and who you work for than it is the work that you do. Now, let me finish, because some people take me to task on that.
Sure.
Find people that care about you. Find people that are willing to invest in you. Find people that want to see you succeed. Hitch your wagon to those people and climb your mountains together.
Yeah, that's powerful, because I could tell you my best job experience was working for because he never said we worked. I worked for him. He always said I worked with him, and he was the one that got me into technology. And it was absolutely amazing because he did invest in me. He saw something in me that others didn't when I did a career switch. And he's like, "You can do this job." He goes, "We're just adding IT to it." He goes, "I could teach you that part." He goes, "But I can't teach you how to be the person you are."
Right.
So he's like, "That's why I want you." And then he built me up from there. And it's, that was something that I'll never forget. And yeah, it is amazing. I love that you said that because it's not what you do, it's who you work for. And, and the impact that you make on people too. Yeah, I love it.
Exactly.
All right. Last one. And this is the one that we're probably going to get a bunch of heat on for social media is pineapple on pizza. Yes or no?
I like pineapple on pizza.
So
I'm going to say yes.
That's all right. For me, I'm not a sweet. I don't know if there's something about pineapple on pizza. I love pineapple, but I just don't love it on pizza. But I'm a traditional pepperoni guy. You know what I mean? So
I do. And I'm a Chicago, I've been asked you, what's your favorite meal? If you were going to be executed, what would you have? I would have a large sausage pizza from Vito and Nick's, 84th and Pulaski in Chicago. I mean, it's cracker crust. They cut it into little bites. There's toppings on everything. I mean, there's still shag carpeting on the wall from back in the 50s, and they only take cash, but it is the best pizza I've ever had in my life.
That's awesome. I love that. And I figured from Chicago, you'd have to have some Chicago pizza, right? Because nowhere else is the same.
No, absolutely.
Awesome. Well, Terry, this has been awesome. And, what's one thing as we wrap things up, because I don't want to take too much of your time, but as we wrap things up, what's one thing you would really want the listeners to take away from today?
I guess let me tell you a story. Because I think the story, it was so impactful on me. I was treated for 4.5 years in the infusion center at the University of Colorado Hospitals with an experimental drug. And there was a nurse there who was already a nurse, but she was young. She was about 25 years old. And she was learning how to do things on the unit when I first met her. And about 6 months later, she's taking care of me by herself. And she comes in and she says, "Terry, I've got a story I want to tell you, but I don't know how to tell it to you." And Nate, what do you say to somebody? How do you respond to that? And I said, "I hope you decide you want to tell me because I think I would enjoy hearing it." Next couple hours, she's in and out doing her thing. Finally comes in, sits down. She's like, "All right, here's the story." She said, "When I first met you, I was going to get out of nursing. I'd had a very good friend of mine die. I was in a really dark place. I talked to my family. I was going to get out of nursing and go to work for Amazon." And she said, "And then I met you." And she said, "And I see what you go through. I see the terrible reactions you have to this medicine. And you keep coming back. You keep coming back. You keep coming back." And she said, "Then I went in your chart when I was taking care of you, and I read everything that you'd been through, the drug therapies, the amputations, everything you'd been through." And she said, "When I finished reading your story, I knew I was where I was supposed to be." Now, if she would have never told me that story, I would have had no idea that just the way I was living my life had had such an impact on this young person. So anybody who's listening to us, if you think your story doesn't matter, if you think your life doesn't matter, I guarantee you, I will promise you this, that there is somebody, maybe many people, that are watching how you handle your adversity in life and would give almost everything they have just to walk 5 minutes in your shoes. So don't ever think your life, your story, whatever you're going through in life doesn't matter. It does matter. And be brave enough to stand up and tell people the things that you've learned.
Yeah, that's powerful because you never think of that, right? A lot of times, like myself, I try to be humble. As you see above my head, it says "just a dude" because someone asked me once, "Hey, how would you describe yourself?" And I was like, "I don't know, I'm just a dude. I'm just a guy, a normal everyday guy that just comes out there and tries to, I don't want to say survive, but try to live my life to the fullest, the way that, the best way that I know how, and to learn from others to make sure that I make it even better." And, that's what brought us up. But that's a great point because you never know who's watching you, especially if you have children, right? Children emulate you more than anything. And that right there, if you can live your best life and your children see that and grow up to be good human beings as adults, then, you've lived a meaningful life, I think.
I agree. I mean, let me share, if you don't mind, a quick story.
No, go ahead.
Our daughter was at the Air Force Academy one day, and she would call every Sunday as kind of a check-in just to see how she was doing it. And one day, I remember it was in February, the snow was flying, it was cold. And she said, "Mom and Dad, I'm really glad I have the relationship that I do with you because so many kids here hate their parents." And I was like, the tears were coming. I'm like,
yeah,
we did something right. Our daughter has a good remembrance of her life growing up with us. So you're right. I mean, kids are like
Yeah,
sponges. They'll
they
do
are.
everything that they see you doing.
And that's a beautiful thing, but it shocks me that there's so many other kids that just didn't like their parents, and it's like, wow, what was going on in that household? How, I wish we could have maybe helped them before they went down that path. But
Well, I think a lot of
yeah,
their kids they're high achievers, they're really smart. And I think parents, they push their kids. They push their kids to do things that maybe they
yeah,
don't want to do. And I think that's where the resentment comes in. And it's like, I hate you. Why did you make me do this? And let
yeah.
your kids do their own thing. Let your kids
Let
fail.
them live their own life, right?
Exactly.
Don't live vicariously through your children because it never works good. Never. But yeah, Terry, now you also mentioned you have 2 books, right? What are the names of the books that you have for the listeners?
So the first book is called Sustainable Excellence, 10 Principles to Leading Your Uncommon and Extraordinary Life. And the second book is actually just came out last week, 4 Truths and a Lie, Ancient Wisdom for Living Your Modern Purpose.
I love that. And where can they get the books, Terry?
Pretty much anywhere you can get a book online, you can get both of them. Amazon's probably the
Awesome.
easiest place.
Can they order them from motivationalcheck.com as well?
If you go to motivationalcheck.com, the Amazon link, the books are right there. You can just click on
Right
them.
there?
Right there. Yeah.
Awesome. And Terry, so I'm going to have a guest page for you on justadudepodcast.com. So I'll have all your links there as well as any social media that you may have. And so people can go to motivationalcheck.com or justadudepodcast.com to find all of Terry's information. And then, obviously his books are going to be available on Amazon as well. But yeah, Terry, this has been absolutely amazing. I loved having you on because, number one, I think we relate a little bit because we've chewed some of the same dirt, maybe different parts of Ohio, but we've definitely did it. But I love hearing, here's 2 guys that used to be cops that are really, it shows, I hope people can at least take this from it, that there are good cops out there. And we really did do the job because we truly wanted to help people, and it shows now that you're still continuing on that motivation and trying to, help people live their best lives, just like I'm trying to do. I want people to take something positive from every show that I do. And I think that this has been it's been very positive for me. So I know I'm walking away from it is a good thing. So if you take anything from that, but anything else that you want to share with the audience before we depart?
No, I mean, this has been a blast. I always love talking to fellow people that have been in law enforcement, and thank you for doing what you're doing. Keep doing it. I mean, because you're trying to make that dent in the world, and that's really what it's all about. I think at the end of our lives, we stand before our Creator, and if we hear the words "Well done, good and faithful servant," I mean, to
Absolutely.
me, that's the best thing I can hear.
Thanks for hanging with us, Terry. Listeners, if you like this, smash that subscribe button, leave a review, tell your buddies. Until next time, stay informed, be yourself, and we can all use a little bit of new information to make ourselves a little bit better. I'm Nathan, and I'll see you on the next episode.